Okay, let's get started. Thank you for all joining today. Just before we commence, we'd just like to big welcome to you on the call and to our speakers. We'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this online webinar is hosted, and the traditional custodians of the lands where our Australian-based speakers and participants are located. And we would also like to pay respects to elders past, present and future. Today's topic is all about information and reporting and how you can get a better grip of all that within your Microsoft 365 environment. Sensitive data can end up in the wrong hands and present a wide range of risks. A lot of the time organizations focus on the external aspects of exposure, and however too often the internal security exposure is forgotten, the instances of internal sharing and external sharing with guests and so on. Today we'll do some introductions shortly, the next slide, but we've got Warren on the call. You'll see him at the bottom there, coming to us from San Francisco. I think that might be a background actually, as is mine. And Warren is from AvePoint, and if you're not familiar with AvePoint, they're probably the biggest third-party kind of product provider, services and products to extend the Microsoft 365 platform from a whole range of different aspects, from backup. Backup is very common. Many of you may be even running AvePoint's backup today, right through to other tools like records management and a whole range of security and other features. So we're going to be looking today at and talking about a new product from AvePoint called Policies and Insights, which extends on the Microsoft 365 capabilities. We're going to wrap that discussion around a couple of scenarios that we think you'll identify with. Okay. Next slide there. Thanks, Warren. So as I said, I'm Andrew Jolly. I'm from Engage Squared. I'm a senior solutions architect, all things extraordinaire sometimes. To my right is Warren.
Hi guys, so my name is Warren Marks from AvePoint Software. So I predominantly work with large organizations, really helping them get return of investment and make true use out of their Office 365 platform.
Thanks, Warren. And we've got Kenny as well, Kenny Singh from Microsoft, who's joined us today as well. Kenny, introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you. Look, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this very important session today. Discussing information protection, information governance. The top of mind items for our customers and partners today. So I'm Kenny Singh. I'm the cybersecurity and compliance product manager for Microsoft Australia. So I have the responsibility for ensuring that our cybersecurity and compliance products in this geography are meeting the needs of the customers, and that our partners actually have everything they need to help our customers be successful. So thanks again for the opportunity, Andrew.
No, thank you for joining us. On the next slide, we'll just go through the agenda, how we'll structure the next hour, 55 minutes. We've done our introductions. Why I asked Kenny on the call is I wanted him to give us a bit of an overview of the security and compliance from an industry perspective. So we start really macro, and then Warren and I will go a little bit more micro down to your level and your organizations and some common scenario discussions. Then at the end, we'll do Q&A. This is a Teams live meeting, so you'll be able to jump into the chat on the right-hand side. Anytime along the way, just jot a question in there. I have my colleagues Lauren and Steph, who you may see in the bottom of the screen there. They're watching that, and they'll be able to help us out with rounding those questions up and seeing how we can provide some answers to you at the end of the session. So please don't hesitate to chip in there. There's no such thing as a silly question. Every question's a good one. So feel free to participate. Thank you. And then we'll also talk some next steps as well at the very end. Great. So to kick things off, Kenny, security, compliance, the industry landscape. What are the main sort of themes that are kind of right on the tip of everyone's tongues from that perspective at the moment?
So look, there's absolutely no denying the fact, Andrew, that last year was one of the most unprecedented years for at least my lifetime, and in my conversations with customers and partners in their lifetimes as well. So there are three themes that consistently came out in most of the conversations that I had and that my colleagues had with customers and partners across Australia. So the first theme was that we saw a very significant escalation in cyber threats across Australia. And there are a few key statistics that are presented on that slide. So the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, they received 2,266 security incident reports, 59,800 cybercrime reports, almost one report every 10 minutes. So it was very, very incredible to see how the cyber threats had actually escalated. They just not escalated in terms of numbers, they'd actually escalated in terms of their sophistication as well. There's a term that we actually use quite widely in the industry called advanced persistent threats. We saw a lot more advanced persistent threats. So advanced persistent threats are the kind of threats that basically live in your environment for an extended period of time. The average time for an advanced persistent threat to be discovered is about 45 days. And so, these are very sophisticated threats that basically use many, many different mechanisms. So that was the first theme, a significant escalation in cyber threats across the entire Australian landscape, spanning energy and utility and government and all the other industries that we actually have in our incredible nation. The second theme that we actually heard was that because people were working in remote environments, because the new definition of work environments basically became these hybrid environments, modern environments that basically span people's houses, offices, basically non-corporate locations. That was basically presenting a bigger opportunity for cyber criminals to break into the data and information of organizations. So a couple of examples in that context. People using personal devices, how do we actually secure them? Wi-Fi is being used in homes and in non-secure locations, in non-corporate secure locations. How do we actually secure them? So, all these different variables basically adding to a significantly increased attack surface that the organizations, that our customers, that our partners needed to defend. And defend pretty quickly because they actually had to respond to all of this very quickly. There wasn't a lot of advance notice at all. So that was the second theme. The third theme we heard is because of the economic impact of COVID-19, most of the organizations were under a lot of stress to reduce cost, to cut cost and to do more with less. So that was a very strong theme that came through. And automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning were things which are quite top of mind because all these things have the possibility of, to a certain degree, alleviating that challenge. So yeah, so those were the those were the three key items we actually heard, Andrew. I'd absolutely love to hear how Engage Squared and AvePoint are thinking about solving these challenges for our customers. So thank you.
Great. Last week, Kenny, I sat in on that Microsoft Digital Defense Report webinar, and I found it really insightful. And I've just put the little short link there to the PDF that's available to download. I encourage you to have a bit of a look. It's really well prepared, and there's even some videos out there, I think, with Microsoft doing a wrap-up and a round-up of that as well. So it's safe to say, Kenny, it's probably not what we've seen in the last 12 months is likely to continue in the ferocity of those attacks and threats and stuff, given that the malicious actors are capitalizing on the chaos. Is that fair to say?
That is absolutely fair to say. That's absolutely fair to say. So we're not seeing a de-escalation, we're actually seeing an escalation. So the threats are growing in number, they're growing in sophistication going forward.
Doom and gloom, sorry everyone. But thanks, Kenny. That's good to get a kind of step back and look at it from a high level. Let's step into some common scenarios and put some of this in context for everyone on the call. So if we turn our attention to the local level, Warren and I had asked ourselves a similar question about what we're seeing across our customer bases, and we sort of tried to come up with a little collection of scenarios that we might use today to talk to you about. We've got three and they are the concept of the notion of rapidly moving to 365 and what that means, the ease of sharing externally, and this notion of shadow users. We'll talk. Warren will take us through each scenario, and we'll just also contrast that to how the AvePoint's policy insights can help us out in each of those scenarios. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit about the Microsoft space and the tenant that you have, and we'll learn a little bit about how policies and insights might be able to help you out a bit further. So the rapid move to M365, Warren, how have people arrived at the cloud? What have you sort of seen? What's the dominant themes you've seen emerge there from your perspective?
Yeah, so thanks, AJ. It certainly was an unprecedented year last year, and you know, we had to put a little bit of a meme in here because it just carries such relevance on what we saw in the market last year, that you know, who led your digital transformation or the digital transformation efforts of your organization, and COVID-19 has certainly been the catalyst of getting organizations into the cloud purely because of survival. You know, you had to enable your employees to work during lockdown periods at a very, very quick pace. So, you know, the core part of what we do in our business is helping organizations plan and get their data workloads into the cloud. And prior to COVID, it was a fairly time-consuming exercise around analysis and planning to ensure that the information that you were taking into Microsoft Cloud and the workloads you were taking into Microsoft Cloud was done in an effective, controlled manner with the optimal governance and you know, lack of users being affected without accessing data and so on. Well, you know, last year, we think back to March, organizations literally had to enable their employees to work from home overnight. You know, and the statistics that we've gathered from Microsoft in the growth that they've had within their cloud platforms really correlate to that. You know, in April last year, they mentioned that they had found 2 months or 2 years worth of digital transformation in a 2-month period, you know, with 200 million teams, you know, participants being used every single day. And those are generating more than 4.1 billion meeting minutes across 75 million active users. I mean, those are just astronomical numbers, and that was almost 100% growth from what we saw in 2019. So it just really illustrates how quickly organizations move to cloud. And these really are organizations of all sizes, you know, from the very, very small to the exponentially big. 117 organizations of greater than 100,000 users using Teams, and the likes of 2,700 are greater than 10,000 users. So it just shows the magnitude of usage of Teams. And the reality is, without these cloud platforms, economically, it would have been a very, very different tale with COVID being introduced. So us having the ability to enable remote workers as quickly as we did is really a testament of the value of cloud technologies and you know, the ability for users to collaborate. However, it did come with challenges. You know, moving so quickly into the cloud certainly created a few potential risks for organizations that they are still trying to put controls in place today to manage. And it affected different organizations differently. You know, if I look at the likes of AvePoint, you know, we've been Microsoft 365 users for many years. You know, we do everything in the cloud. We've got a very geographically dispersed employee base worldwide. So that architecture and the ability to use cloud really, you know, we got huge benefit out of it from a business perspective prior to COVID. So what it meant when COVID arrived, it was a fairly transparent and easy transition for us to make, you know, to really just continue using those cloud technologies. But there were other organizations that were still in those planning phases and still predominantly using on-premise technologies or partially using Microsoft 365, like perhaps just Exchange Online or just email. And those organizations had to enable Teams very, very quickly and didn't have the time, you know, due to the unforeseen, you know, results of COVID to do that necessary planning. So they almost put the cart before the horse, so to speak. It always used to be, let's work out the governance prior. But in that scenario, it was switch it on and we'll have to worry about it later. So there's lots of organizations that are still in that state, and without the controls, they've obviously got a plethora of information being created, and rightly so, across their user base. So historically, we've been involved in lots of migrations, and as I mentioned, migrations are all about planning, doing discovery, identifying risk prior to migration. But a lot of organizations found themselves in a situation where they had large amounts of information still sitting on-prem that was business pertinent for their users to get their job done, and they had to move that information into the cloud fairly quickly. So they forego any planning around it because the networks just couldn't handle the influx of users coming in on one small internet pipe. So they did what we call a lift and shift. They took that information and they injected it straight into the cloud platforms, and again, worried about cleaning that information up later. Now, there's no real harm in that, but there is risk, right? And what a lot of people aren't aware of is the way that permissions are managed within Office 365 in comparison to your on-premise technologies like a file server, for example, are vastly different because of search. So what I mean by that is if you are using a file server, the only way you know you have access or don't have access to something is by clicking through on the folders and getting an access denied, or it just lets you in to see the data therein. Cloud works slightly differently. It really works with enterprise search. So when you put in a keyword in a search interface, it will go and search across all of your collaboration platforms and bring back results for something that correlates that you have access to. Now, if your permission structures have collected a little bit of a mess over the last 20 years, you certainly run the risk when you move to Office 365 with a lift and shift fashion of information becoming exposed to eyes that really shouldn't be seeing that data. And that's what you have to now, what we're really helping organizations try and cater for, to identify where their sensitive content is that they've now moved in a hurry, and helping them lock that down to ensure that they don't have any data leaks or any threats across that information. So, as Kenny rightly said, there's really three core areas that organizations are dealing with today. We know cyber threats are growing in frequency just because of the influx into cloud. Remote work has become the new norm. That's not by choice. It's really around survival for organizations. But the most important and challenging that we see in organizations, again, as Kenny rightly said, is they're expected to do that much more with limited budget, or with minimum the same budget, because organizations limited their spend when COVID hit due to the uncertainty, but they had the introduction of all of these new technologies and the changes in the way that everybody worked, but they still had to manage everything as effectively under the same budget. So again, it just really amplifies the need that the organizations have today to ensure that their sensitive content is properly secured.
Great, thanks. And really good insights. And you mentioned about doing more with less, and of course, a lot of organizations experiencing that rapid decline in revenue as well. So it's the perfect storm, isn't it? For a lot of companies out there, we can't forget. So the next scenario we thought we'd sort of go into is the ease of sharing externally, and sharing with one of the most amazing things with the platform is that sharing has become a lot easier. If people remember back to the old days of sort of SharePoint SharePoint on premises and so on, you really were sending. It was difficult to do the sharing that we can do today. It's in fact, it's so easy to share now. It's arguably easier than downloading and putting an attachment on an email, which I think is a significant feat by Microsoft. While it is really easy to share, what are some of the aspects we need to be aware of, Warren? What's kind of, I guess, the top of the list, so to speak?
So, and it's a great question, and the way that I like to look at this is our working life has become virtual, right? Both virtual for our internal organization, but also virtual to the external organization as well. I used to meet many customers in person, would drive to their offices, go into a boardroom and have a whiteboard session, and all of that now has become virtual. So it's in essence made the world a smaller place, but from a technology perspective. And again, Microsoft 365 has enabled that because they've allowed us to invite guest users into teams and collaborate on the same workspaces. So very similarly to what we were doing in person, physically going in and meeting one another in a boardroom, we're doing exactly the same thing on a virtual level. However, again, it's having those controls and that enablement for intercompany, collaboration comes with some risk as well. And it's really about identifying what that risk is. In technology, anything's possible, but from an organizational standpoint, you want to ensure that you have the right governance framework sitting around that to minimize or mitigate any risks. Now, the challenge comes in is that our employees are come across multiple generations, so they're not necessarily all very technically savvy. So the room for human error is fairly great. So it's quite easy to do things like share a document. Okay, it's 2 clicks to go and share, and there's multiple ways you can share a document depending on what workload you are working in. So often users are making an error by sharing something to somebody that they shouldn't be sharing it to without truly understanding what the implications are of those actions. There's nothing malicious about it. It really just comes down to human error. And I can promise you, everybody's guilty of oversharing to a degree. The philosophy always used to be, I'll just give you access today, I'll take the access away tomorrow, and by the end of the business day, you've forgotten about it. So normally there may not be a problem with that, but again, if it is sensitive content that is being shared, the risk around that is obviously amplified, and there's just so many options to share. So I mean, Andrew, I'm sure you've working with a lot of customers on your side as well. They don't always understand the implication of the ease of sharing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that, and you'll talk about this later because I know we did a little rehearsal, but often it might make complete sense to share in that moment, but then should that remain shared in 6 to 12 weeks time? So that's one aspect, is the temporal aspect of sharing. And also probably the idea of sharing or inviting them in. So sometimes that's not understood either, whether they should bring them into a library as a guest user or send them a link. So yeah, there are definitely different aspects to it that are very new to a lot of people. I think Microsoft try and do a good job of keeping the language simple when we're operating these tools, but I think there's a limit where it sort of it kind of obscures what's really happening under the hood. So as you say, it's often not malicious acting at all. In fact, if anything, people are doing great. The resilience, I think, of many people I've watched in our customer base, people that you would have thought we're on that sort of technological backseat. It's amazing how some of them have really accelerated their literacy and digital literacy. But sharing can be still a little bit tricky and a little bit mystical to some people. So yeah. And in this diagram, you've got the ability to share from within this one's PowerPoint. You can do the sharing from within the SharePoint itself. And there's even the ability to share from within Teams, and understanding all those dynamics can be a new thing for many people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what the conundrum that organizations are faced with is the sharing options are there, even if you haven't opened up externally, which in my opinion in today's world is a lot more difficult not to do. Right, a lot of organizations have opened up externally, but even if you haven't, the sharing capability, even on an internal perspective, is there. So the question comes in is, how do you police it? How do you manage it? How do you get visibility to where those risk areas are? What's being shared that shouldn't be shared? Now, as I mentioned earlier, that COVID has resulted in organizations forced to do more with less. And what that means is that IT doesn't have the luxury of employing an additional 10 resources to help with the management of that information and identify any of those risks. And chatting to Kenny yesterday, a new hot topic and discussion point at the moment across organizations is what we refer to as insider risks. So, risks and threats that are identified within an organization too, which again stems from the potential of some permission challenges. So, if we looked at how easy it is to share information, a couple of the ability that we're surfacing information via search where access isn't or permissions aren't set up correctly, again, it just exposes how big the risk is for organizations. And with all of that in mind, that was really the driving factor behind the Policies and Insights application that we brought to the market. We saw the challenges that organizations were having with identifying and managing the risk around their information. So, the thought process around it was to really target this in three core areas. Number one is we want to be able to go in and find risk information and prioritize what we feel is greater risk. So the more sensitive information across your environment. And the second tier then is to continually monitor and fix any new items that come up. And the final piece then is to enforce and prevent future issues from reoccurring. So again, I use the example that we gave where there's not necessarily something malicious around the user sharing. They may not be aware. So, we want to drive the right behavior by perhaps on a sensitive item, removing the ability to share. And then there's just less room for human error. So as we go through the webinar, I'm going to touch on these three segments and just extrapolate out a little bit on how we find and prioritize and monitor and fix and so on to give you guys an understanding of the simplicity of the organization, of the application from a configuration perspective, but the real power of the results that you're getting out of it, that even the business user could be reviewing if need be. It doesn't always need to necessarily be a core IT driven tool. So
that's a good point, Warren, is that a lot of these, you can get information about external sharing from your tenant. There's a couple of interfaces, a couple of reports here and another one over there. And there's also, you'll find many people talking about PowerShell scripts to run things. And so while it's there, but it doesn't all come together in a way that makes it easy to do once a week for 30 minutes by someone that isn't in the IT systems admin team. It doesn't make it easy to do that. So I think that's one of the most attractive things I take away from Policies Insights, Warren, and I hope everyone will be able to see this, is that it sort of pulls everything together, puts a big bear hug around all these different sources, and then actually layers in some additional technology as well that makes it more unique to you. So I won't steal the thunder, Warren, but
not at all.
Yeah.
It's about telling a story, I think. That's what really hits home with me, is that you're right. There are native reporting capabilities there, and what Microsoft offers natively is incredibly powerful. But it's piecing multiple reports together in a single pane of glass, and that's what I hope to illustrate for you guys today. We want to identify things as quickly as possible, so you can act on them as quickly as you can.
Get the context and then act. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Great.
So let's look at how we find and prioritize. Now, step number one, we want to identify what sensitive content is across your collaboration platforms. Now, I say your collaboration platforms because remember that, yes, we all adhere to similar standards, frameworks, regulations, depending on what industry you're in. But every organization has uniqueness. There will be policies and data management type rules around data that's sensitive to your organization. So these types of applications are never a one size fits all. You need flexibility when it comes to configuration. And so we tap into the Microsoft 365 compliance standards, and there's pretty much all of them, including local ones, specifically for AU, like the ASD Essential 8 and APRA and CPS 234 and so on. I mean, you will turn on which ones you need to adhere to, because this is going to go and look across your information, across all of your collaboration platforms, and find information that doesn't adhere to these standards or regulations that will be deemed as sensitive content. And when I talk about collaboration platforms, I'm talking about the likes of the Microsoft Teams, the SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, as an example. Now, if there is something unique to your organization outside of these compliance standards. You also have the ability to input your own definitions to go and find content, that you would deem as sensitive. So that's the first step. The second step is identifying what high exposure, or what exposure as a whole is to your organization. Now, this is really dictated by how your organization works and who you collaborate with within and external to your organization. So we've divided this up into 3 core levels. We've got high exposure, medium exposure, and low exposure. And if you look at the options that are built in there, the very first option is high exposure, something that's shared with external users more than X times. Now, if you're a technology company, for example, and a big part of your business is collaborating with external parties outside of your organization, you wouldn't see that as potentially being a high exposure. Whereas perhaps you are a financial organization that's not sharing any of your data outside of your organization. There you might have sharing external users with 0 time. So I think, again, what is important here is you have complete flexibility to set up all the relevant configuration that it becomes relevant to your organization versus anyone else's organization. And again, these can be configured again at a later date. So what you might find with some organizations is they're having a look at the data, and they might be flexible and reconfigure some of those rules, should you need to more align with the way that you're doing business, because a lot of organizations have no idea where their risk areas are. So you might start quite aggressive, and then become less aggressive as you start implementing the relevant policies and mitigation plans. Once those 2 items are put together, the net result is a dashboard that gives us insight to what the construct of our data looks like and where the risk areas are across across our collaboration platforms within our organization. Now, keep in mind, and I'll chat a little bit about the dashboard that you see in front of you now, but just about everything on this dashboard has click-throughs. So it's giving you all of that high-level information rolled up into that single pane of glass, and where you identify a risk information, you can start drilling down to get more specific type of information to facilitate your thought process on how you want to mitigate any of those risks. So on the top right-hand side, you'll see we've got overall risk scores, where it's really collating all of those configuration items around sensitivity and high exposure, and rolling it up into pockets of information that would be deemed as your high risk type data. We've also got the contributing factors of external users and anonymous links and any of the sensitive items, with access summaries and any of the object type risk items. But where I have to click through, for example, if I click through on external users, it immediately will give me a list of who my external users are. So immediately, if I see something in there that I deem as not being quite kosher within my environment, I can immediately click on it and remove that external user or group from that list immediately. Now, obviously, this is not designed to manage at scale. And as we move through the webinar, we'll talk about the policies portion, which is there to design at scale, manage at scale. But this is to give you that first level the overview of your information. How big is the problem that we're dealing with? How big are the risks across my information? Is there something I can resolve on the fly, potentially for really high risk data? But this is going to stimulate the thought process around your decision making on how you're going to mitigate those risks on a more permanent level in the form of policies. Andrew, let's chat a little bit around shadow users, which is the next piece, which drills down in a little bit more detail around the manageability. Yeah,
this is probably a nice little specific scenario that I thought we'd delve into. We started wide with the industry side of things. We've narrowed it down, and we thought this was a nice one because some people will know about this scenario, and others may not. So a nice little piece to learn on. So there's a question that comes up in conversations, particularly with organizations who have come to terms with how Microsoft Teams works together with SharePoint. Okay, so some of you on the call will know, for every Microsoft team, there's a kind of a SharePoint warehouse behind it, a dedicated site collection for that team. It's where all the documents are housed and how they filter up and they display in the files within your teams. There's an interplay between the team and SharePoint in terms of permissions. Now you'll see here that the blue box at the front, that's your team. But what's governing the permissions to that team is two Microsoft 365, a Microsoft 365 group, right, for your team. You might be familiar with that. And then within that group, there's two kind of classifications, owners and members. So some of you might know this. I'm an owner of a group. I'm a member. If I'm an owner, I can add people in to the members. And what I'm doing there is we're adding membership in at the group level, Microsoft group construct. That group construct is also used you will actually see it as a member of the corresponding SharePoint group within the SharePoint site, and you'll be able to see how, actually I might have had an extra arrow on here, but essentially by virtue of being a member of the Microsoft group, you're getting access to the SharePoint group and therefore the files within behind the scenes. Now these, and that's even showed there by the little purple people or blue people there. These orange folks, they're actually members of the SharePoint groups, and this one is a visitor. And in this one, there's two orange folks here in the SharePoint members group of the SharePoint site. Now, if this orange person tried to come into the team, they'd actually be denied. They can't get in because they're not a member of that Microsoft group. But we've actually sort of, what I like to call, brought them through the side entrance into the SharePoint site. Now, you might think, well, that sounds horrifying. And well, actually, it has some really interesting benefits. And for example, you might want, let's pretend this is one of the legal team in the middle here in the members group in SharePoint, that's you've asked to come in and look at a specific document, right? Because you can share a document with that person. You just want a peer review of a contract that you're working on. You don't want to add them to the whole team because you just want them to look at this one document, check some T's and C's, and that's it. Right? So that's a very valid reason why you would do this kind of sharing scenario. And likewise for visitors group, you might have a person that wants to be able to read all the project sites, but not be a member of all the project teams. So there's some good reasons why that happens. However, there's probably some reasons why that isn't a great thing. And I think I focus on the scenario, Warren, because this is one scenario where it's really hard to see with any of the Microsoft reports and even the PowerShell scripts, to be honest, where this is happening, right? And I think you hinted at, showed me something around the policy and insights being able to do this, and I really thought that would be really useful for people on this call. Yeah,
absolutely, and I completely agree. And maybe just a good segue from that slide is I'm going back two-dimensional, but nice. just to show you guys where the boundaries are around those teams. The team is the top layer, and that's where your security boundaries sit. So all of your members within that team will be added at the team level. Underneath the team, you then have channels. And that's really the communication boundary. So all of the chats and everything will be kept in there. And then you've got the tabs that are associated to teams from there. The tabs are the additional workload. So when you look in Teams, you have a Files tab. That Files tab is SharePoint, right? Behind the scenes in Teams, that's where SharePoint sits. Now, SharePoint is a standalone workload. It's provisioned within the team and within the group here, but it is a standalone workload. So what that means is that when you come in the team, if you're a member, you'll have access, you'll get in, you can access the SharePoint site. But if you don't come in the team, you've still got access to the SharePoint site on its own and can get into the SharePoint site as well. And that's where the risk area starts coming in, because you can access a file, and if you've got external sharing enabled, you can share that individual file to somebody outside of your organization or even within the organization, but they're not a member of the team itself. So if I have the team and I'm managing the team and looking at the members, I feel I've got a full representation on who belongs in that team and who's got access to the documents they're in. There's no front-end reporting mechanism on any of these shadow users that have got access to documents sitting within the Files tab within the team, although they still don't have access to the team itself and won't see the chats, but they've still got access in, that side door that AJ was talking about. And that is a risk, depending on the sensitivity of the team. You want to have visibility on who those users are. Now, as we said earlier, it's because sharing is so easy that these shadow users come about. And again, the end user or the employees often don't even know that they are creating shadow users, right, by giving out relevant access. But I like the slide because it just shows you just 4 mechanisms already that you can be sharing by anonymous link. Everyone except externally implicit permissions on big groups. So many ways to share data, not just necessarily to a single person, but also to a group of people as well. So that then brings us to how do we monitor and fix this on an ongoing basis. And we do this in Policies and Insights with our workload-based reporting. So similarly to what I showed you slightly earlier on, where we're getting that holistic view of the organization, the difference with this is focusing on your Microsoft Teams environment out of your Office 365 platform. And we have a separate one for, OneDrive for Business, and we have one for SharePoint Online. So all of your collaboration platforms have got this overarching dashboard. But what the dashboard tells you is, firstly, we're identifying any contributing risk factors. So things like anonymous links and sensitive items contained within the team. We are then also identifying any direct sharing items, so shared with everyone or everyone except external users or just external users or anonymous links. And again, these all have click-through. So if you want to know who's got your external users are, you can click through and it'll bring up a list of permissions, and I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. We also have a view of public and private teams. So when you configure teams, you've got the ability to make a public team accessible and viewable for everyone, and private teams would not be. So a good report on what the makeup and the construct is of your teams. And then lastly, across the bottom of the report, as you can see, we've got a summary of guest users. Now remember, guest users are people from outside of your organization that get added into the members tab. So they would automatically have access to all of the files and chats within the team. Okay. We've also got a quick view of shadow users and any high risk items with those click-throughs. So if I go and had to click through onto those. So in this scenario, you can see I've clicked on shadow users to see which teams have shadow users. And directly off that, in this example, I've only got 2, but I can then go and have a look at what permissions those shadow users have across my teams, or what activities that they've performed, who are the channel and members, and even have the ability to export a report out of that as well. I can even look on when I look at the documents that are inside there, you'll notice that there's a high risk item. And if I click through on that high risk item, the reason why it's constitutes as high risk is because if you remember right at the start of the webinars, I was taking you through the configuration. We said that a high risk item is anything that's shared externally outside of my organization more than 0 times. And this has been shared to one external user, so it would constitute as a high risk item. Now, when I said earlier that you may want to go and reconfigure your exposure levels, because perhaps this is not a high risk item and maybe we want to change, shared externally more than once.
Yeah, maybe 5 times or something like that, Warren. Yeah,
exactly right.
I think what I'll come back to, just occurred to me right then and there. The other point you made earlier on, I think, is you mentioned like it's about telling a story. This is what I think you mean by the story. So not only have you just seen, here's a bunch of sites with shadow users, Excel spreadsheet. You've jumped in and now you're seeing, okay, these sites, and these are the Jessica's shared it with these people and they're a high risk. So you are creating that story for this context, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Got it.
The story is crucially important because it's not a guarantee that this is actually a problem area. After investigation and understanding the who, the what, the where, the why, this may be relevant that you've got an external user accessing this piece of information. But to round it all off, you can say, well, it may be skeptical, they may need to have access, they may not. Let's go and have a look at the activities that they've had on that file. And we can go and get an audit trail of exactly who's interacted and how they've interacted with that file. And that will be the final piece of the story. Is it looks skeptical. Actually, you know what, by further review, everything's above board here. Or the inverse of, we actually have a problem here. We need to remove this immediately and send it to our, risk and compliance guys to investigate further. But the beauty of it is that you've got the full audit trail behind it. So it's not a matter of normally you would have no visibility that the shadow user or the guest user even existed, where here not only can you pick up visibility, not only will it identify if it's a sensitive item or a risk item, but you can get a full view of every interaction they've had across your platform as well, which is just an incredibly powerful information to have. To make IT and business lives easier in making informed decisions on how they want to secure their information. The final then piece is to say, well, we've now viewed our information, we've identified all of the risk areas and exposure levels, and we've bedded down. We now want to start putting in long-term or permanent type policies to drive the right behavior and stop compounding these potential risk items. And the way that we do that is with our policies portion. Really the way that it works is it's got various levels that you can apply those policies to. So, when I talk about levels, I'm talking at the tenant level or perhaps down at each of the collaboration items. So, maybe you want to put a tenant-wide policy, or maybe you just want a policy just on Teams or just on OneDrive for Business. But again, you want to use these policies in a manner that you're driving the right behavior from the employees and you're mitigating any potential of human error. Now, we've tried to keep this as simple as possible, because if these systems are just too complex to use, they just don't get adopted, and that's really the general feel on cloud as a whole. So you'll notice that simple drop down to go and apply those relevant policies. And you'll see you've taken a snippet here of what type of policies exist. And this is just a snippet. There's significantly more than just the snapshot that's here. But really they range from classification enforcement based on sensitivity and compliance labels, to external sharing configuration, to deletion restrictions, even down to permission inheritance. Now, anyone who's administered SharePoint for some time would have had a headache somewhere in their career about broken inheritance permissions within SharePoint. So again, just like the configuration around the sensitivity, the exposure levels, the policies may vary and will be unique for your organization based on what your security and enforcement needs are. They will vary based on those results. And like anything, it's not set in stone. So, we keep all of the policies in a very simple dashboard. And what that allows you then to do is either copy old policies or go and edit existing policies as your organization evolves. But you'll see the layout's very, very simple, very, very easy to understand, but it does give you a lot of flexibility around how you want to implement these policies that make the most sense. Because maybe you want to roll a policy back. It might have been the users are not reacting well to it. It's making their work more cumbersome. You always have that ability. Nothing's ever set in stone, and that's what we love about it. Needs to be fluid.
The previous slide really showed heaps of options there, and you mentioned it's just the surface.
Yeah.
It's almost the agenda for a whole nother series of webinars.
Absolutely.
So, because when I look at that, I know that in the past, a lot of these types of things people try to fix using sort of or control using sort of routine PowerShell type scripting or some clever configuration of some of Microsoft stuff. And whereas if it's in that one place, that's powerful, and it'd be great to set up another time where we could invite the same participants and explore that whole end of the Policies Insights tool. It looks very extensive, so yeah, keen to see more of that.
Absolutely.
Questions and answers. We're just on 10 to 11, so we've got 10 minutes to go. We mentioned earlier, we're just in the chat for the live event. We've got a couple of people monitoring the questions there. There's a few in there already. I'll kick them off. Feel free to add some more in there if you've got anything that comes to mind. What Microsoft 365 license SKU would you need for Policies Insights to work? Is it dependent on E1, E3, or E5 and so on?
It's not at all. So, whether you're E1, E3, E5, interestingly enough, that index that we're reading from is available from an E1 license and up. As you go further up the SKUs on your Microsoft licensing, some of the security and compliance centers give you more capability, but that index is there already. So we're not license dependent on a specific SKU at all.
Okay, great. And it's a license per person?
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Per user per annum. A couple of different options. We have bundled it into some other products as well, but as a standalone product, it's per licensed Office 365 or per applied Office 365 license per year.
Great. And the other question there is, do we need to install this tool, or is it cloud-based? I think I know what they're getting at. Is it a client app, or is it sort of in the cloud, like you would access, say, an admin center, just like 365?
It's a great question. So it's a full SaaS solution. So we run a platform with all of our cloud-based products called AvePoint Online Services, and that lives in Azure. We have presence in 12 data center instances globally. So, including Australia, we're in the Southeast data center. And it's really an enable, connect to your tenant, and go and let it start scanning and applying your policies. No infrastructure required. We obviously provide an SLA. We guarantee the uptime. We administer the application. So it's a pure software as a service solution.
Great. There's another one there. Does Policies and Insights support email/exchange online? I suppose is the question.
Sorry, Andrew, I actually missed that. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Does Policies and Insights support email/exchange?
Also a great question. So currently today, we cover Microsoft Teams, Groups, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business. Exchange is on the roadmap, and I believe we're a quarter away from that becoming available. So it'll still be this year we will start supporting Exchange as well.
Cool. Couple more licensee ones. Can we trial Policies and Insights before we purchase? How long is the free trial? Is there? I'm sure there's opportunities there. I'm seeing you nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. So we offer a full trial on all of our products. Really easy to enable. You literally sign up for an AvePoint Online Services tenant. It costs you absolutely nothing. It enables it for 30 days. We limit it to the number of policies that you trial.
Okay, cool. Little glitch there, but I think most people heard the answer. The other one there is anonymous person. Great tool. How is it licensed? I think we talked about that. Do we need just licenses for the admins? It's on that per user, per month license approach. So that was just an answer to that one. And then can AvePoint or E2 run this tool as a discovery service for our organization? Yes, we can. In fact, I've just got a slide next where I can talk about that a bit more. Thank you, Nelly. Where we do offer that. How cool. That's just like we planned that. Sorry, but I didn't, I promise. So Nelly, we offer information governance assessment. It's about a sort of a 10, 11 day engagement, and we kind of go through a number of sessions and analysis and things with your business and technology people. We produce a roadmap that kind of gives you, encapsulates the current state, and we talk about your regulatory needs and what you need to align to, look for ways forward, and even touch on the impact of business users and implications for change as well. So we try and cover the technical and the human side of it as well. It's very much an Engage Squared thing. Change management is a massive part of our ethos. And as part of this one, this is an offering we've had in the mix for a while, but Warren and the team at AvePoint have offered some AvePoint Policy and Insight licensing at a reduced rate, and for 12 months. So if you're interested in this, just email info@engagesquared.com, and we'll get back to you, and I'll call you, and we'll have a little discussion about your needs and where you might be able to benefit from this. Good. And I suppose in a long-term situation, there's a question for you, Warren, off the back of Nellie's one.
Yeah.
If an organisation put this in, could they have someone like Engage Squared regularly help them with review and analysis over time? Could we be a user of that with them and service as a service type idea?
Yeah, absolutely, and we would really promote that. Not what we see a lot across the industries is not all organizations have necessarily have the skill set to be deploying and managing these things. So there's definitely an opportunity there. It goes back to what we said earlier. Try and maximize what you have and really limit the spend to do so. So it's definitely an avenue that we can explore.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll skip over that slide. We're pretty much done there. We've got about 5 minutes left. It's always great to finish early and get to your next virtual meeting. Do hope you enjoyed today. And if there's anything there that you have a question about, feel free to reach out to info there. I'm dialed into that inbox at the moment, so I can follow up with you. We can discuss next week, anytime, or whenever you feel like it. I think we're recording this one. Is that right, Lauren? Yes, thumbs up. Thank you, Lauren. And we'll make it available on our website as well. You'll be able to find it at the end of the year. We've got an events in the nav there. You'll be able to see previous events. So great. Well, thank you very much, Warren. Kenny had to disappear a few minutes back, but thanks, Kenny. And also thank you to everyone who made the time today. It's Friday for one. It's an hour of your time. We appreciate you you coming along to the webinar, and we do hope you gain some insights and learn something along the way.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, AJ and team.
Have a good day, everyone.